fake. Okay, let's see where we're on, and I'll send out live notifications. I can't send out text alerts because I'm waiting on a replacement card. Dropped my wallet and some bad Samaritan snagged it. Okay, it looks like we are coming to life here. Now I'll have to get an audio from someone here just to let me know how it sounds. Okay, good. I'm using my other computer and I'm expecting less clippiness because I'm not using the restreaming computer for live research and putting out wrenches. It just seems like whenever I click something, something would happen. Now let me go ahead and turn on the audio as well. Connecting. All right, we are streaming on audio as well. Live to discuss chemtrails. Again, I'm just putting out some links via Discord, and I will put a link to my main YouTube channel, and then I'll put the link out there also on Patreon. And then here in a few moments, and look, I don't know how good the audio is. You can let me know, but I can guarantee that the final copy that will be later will sound a whole lot better. Joined by Clockwork 113 Oswaldo. Thank you for joining. Just got into a extended conversation in Discord, and I want to address it. Okay, here we go. Chemtrails, real or fake? Sounds a little tinny. Like I'm in a tin can. But no big deal. Okay, it's Good Friday, 4/7/2023. And we are live at Infinite Radio. We are live in the 24/7 chat. We are on YouTube, DLive, Twitch, and Odyssey. We'll give people a few moments to show up, but the main topic is chemtrails, real or fake. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up in the Infinite Plane Radio Discord server, and I will be directly referencing the conversation we had earlier and where it ended. Because I think this is a very important topic because it says something about how we accept something as true or likely. And I put out a graphic yesterday, a chart that explains the different frames of reference people have when they consume media. And it really down to, are you going to accept comforting lies, frightening possibilities, or the truth? And my contention is chemtrails is one of these frightening possibilities. Is it true? Well, it's something that people believe in. And this is where the conversation started today. So let me go ahead and here we go. Now, again, I was in a long conversation. It went on for several hours back and forth, and we keep it respectful. There's no ad hominem, but there are misunderstandings. There's a reason why I don't believe and others do. And I'm really trying to get down to the bottom of it. You know, what makes somebody believe it? If it's not documentable evidence, if it's not testable, if it's not repeatable, and does it weigh against other claims? You know, there is such a thing as the status quo, and maybe it's wrong, maybe it's not. But if you're going to challenge it, you have to upset the prevailing standard of evidence, what is considered to be an acceptable burden of proof. And that's where this conversation picks up. So a commenter said to me, could someone tell me if the videos of athletes collapsing on fields are fake too? You know, because I've been auto-hoaxing. I've been calling all these things fake. And the conversation from there drifted into chemtrails. He said, let's get back to chemtrails. Can someone tell me what is spreading across the sky? Is it natural cloud matter? Or is it compounds of something unnatural? And my answer to this is um, it, it's complicated, but it's basically your theory is unfalsifiable. It's a belief. It's a belief system. Because if I give you an answer, you're going to reject it in favor of what you've already accepted as true. He asked, what is spreading across the sky? Is it natural cloud matter or is it compounds of something unnatural? And my answer is it's natural cloud matter. And I had just a few moments ago, I was looking into this possibility that you could recreate, in other words, it's repeatable. You could recreate chemtrails or the appearance of them without anything special added to the fuel. I think it's purely a mechanical process. In other words, he's asking, is it chemicals or is it a natural process? And I'm saying, your question is asked in bad faith if you're not going to accept an answer that actually suffices. In this case, it has been demonstrated that with the correct atmospheric temperature and humidity profiles, even electric aircraft at 30,000 feet can make contrails. And and it says even perhaps 12,000 feet, but these are contrails caused by melting ice cubes. And these are all originating from just the passing craft's mechanical process as it moves across the sky. And what really served as an epiphany for me, when I just suddenly stopped accepting the premise that there was something up, is I was noticing last winter how at the higher altitudes of the mountain peaks, we have these snow machines, and they're just fans that spray hot water in freezing temperatures, and it creates these persistent clouds, but it's an analogous effect. And I was finding many pictures, and you can too. If you believe in chemtrails, you can find many pictures of planes taken off in freezing temperatures, negative 39 degrees Celsius, and it looks like, quote, chemtrails. But that's not what it is. It's clouds caused by the extreme cold and by the engine itself and by the air compression. It's not really difficult to explain, but the problem is the chemtrailers believe it's chemtrails. They just reject the other explanation. But the reason why you can't just reject contrails is that it's testable and repeatable, and you can recreate these effects. And you can't just dismiss that because you want to assume it's chemicals or whatever they're saying that it is. And one of the things too I've noted, and I'll go through the conversation we had, is that like many belief systems, it spreads through consensus building, convincing people to jump on board. And I don't think that's really relevant to the facts. You can get a lot of people to believe some crazy stuff, doesn't make it true. And I've been saying, if this is true, well, then all the pilots could be charged with war crimes. And if you really believed it, like let's say you really believe that commercial airlines are dumping poisons on playgrounds, why aren't you calling 911? Call 911, sue them. And suddenly they get powerless. And like, no, we can't. We're up against a very powerful system and it won't go anywhere. Okay, so then you're just basically acquiescing to it. You're just spreading the fear for no reason. And to me, that just speaks to the point that it's not really about facts. It's a fear-based belief system. And I'm not trying to diminish the fear, because when you're scared of something, if you've been psyched out, the fear is for your own protection. And a lot of them supposedly have some fear. I'm just saying, if the fear is not attached to action, it makes me question if they're really all that scared. I mean, how many decades this is what, 30 years, 20 some years, since 1999, 20 years chemtrails have been a thing. Has anybody dropped dead from chemtrails? Anybody have chemtrail lung? Now, I'll be honest, I used to believe it in a kind of half-assed way. And I used to listen to Richie from Boston, and I would think, okay, the reason why he has that gruff voice is because he's been out there chemtrail spotting. I thought his gig was driving around the country pointing out the chemicals, and that just by being out there, he had pretty much inhaled a lot of chemtrails. Like I thought Richie's voice was like basically chemtrail fry. Well, no, it's not. Now, one other thing too is that chemtrailing or chemtrail theory only appeals to the right wing. You will not, and this is a fact, you will not find a liberal or a leftist that believes in chemtrails. Why is that? That should tell you something. It's partisan. If you're on the left, you believe in climate change. If you're on the right, you laugh at climate change, but you believe in chemtrails, which you will also conflate with geoengineering. And on the one hand, you're like, oh no, man can't do climate change. Man can't affect the weather, but man can geoengineer and affect the weather. Like, these are contradictions. Now, if I believed in chemtrails, I would go do something about it. I would sue. I would start a class action lawsuit. And I've been telling the chemtrails, if you can convince me it's real, I'll save you. I'll take it to city council. I'll start a class action lawsuit. I will be your savior. I will save you from the poisonous skies. But none of them will do it. And again, I think that's very telling. Now, chemtrail theory is also unfalsifiable. And what I mean is that no evidence to the contrary will be accepted. They will automatically say, like, for example, I say, okay, is it commercial airlines? And some of them have ruled that out as a possibility. And they say, no, it's a secret military spraying operation. Well, then you better tell your friends, because 90% of chemtrail believers believe that it's being done by commercial airlines. But then those who have seen through that or realize it's not possible, they go into, oh, well, it's secret invisible ones. I mean, but there's a spectrum. There's not size fits all theory. It's not coherent. There's some who believe that if there's a chemtrail above your head, you can wave a pickle at it and it'll disappear. And that sounds absurd, but no, you have chemtrail believers putting buckets of vinegar in their front yard because they believe that vinegar gets rid of chemtrails. And how do they arrive at this? Here's how. They look at the chemtrail, the condensation trail, and then they put an object outside. It could be vinegar. It could be a statue of a saint. It doesn't even matter. They just believe that because this precedes that, this caused that. It's logically fallacious reasoning, but many fall for it, and they falsely correlate their vinegar with the condensation trails disappearing. And that's the kind of thinking, that's the kind of fallacious thinking that gets people to believe things. And I make the point here that the starting point for off-world stage observation, auto-hoaxing, fake until proven real, if it's fakeable, and if there's a clearly advantageous agenda attached to it, that we are non-believers. I take the position of agnosticism. And I believe also, well, I know this to be true, that we are in a state of psy-war. The weapon isn't ammunition. It's not chemicals. It's not Vaxageddon. The weapon is fear. That's all it is. It's fear. It's fear-based mind control. The elite have always controlled the superstitious masses with weaponized superstition. And this is no different. I think it's weaponized superstition if you think the sky is falling from climate change, or if you're worried about space junk or asteroids or Chinese space balloons. These are all just things to get us to fear the sky. And sadly, truthers are terrified of the sky. They never broke free. Truthers are controlled opposition to liars. And by liars, the establishment media, yeah, they're liars. By default, their whole paradigm is an augmentation onto reality, a deviation from truth. It is by definition a lie, and they are liars. Truthers, it sounds nice, but it's a subjective truth, and it's actually controlled opposition to the establishment lying. And the establishment liars need this dialectic. They need to have their anti for their pro. I don't take the anti or pro position. I'm a conscientious objector to the psy-war. I refuse the fear. Now, commenter said, and this is from the Discord conversation, I have seen with my own eyes a plane up high with a very small and narrow trail that dissipates, probably less than several hundred feet behind the plane. What is the explanation? And my explanation is, when it comes down to this chemtrail theory, only 18% of flights have condensation trails. Only 18%. And this doesn't mean that they are staggering the poison. It doesn't mean that they are mixing it up so we don't find out what they're doing. The reason why it's 18% is that it's very much conditional on altitude and climatic conditions. That's the reason why. And when it comes down to building a consensus about belief, everybody believes it, doesn't make it true. Doesn't make it true. It's like the emperor's new clothes. I've been told, oh well, you just must be a knee-jerk skeptic, or you're brainwashed, or you're a controlled opposition. If they just diminish you or attack your character because you don't see it, yeah, that's not an argument in favor of it. Now, again, I pointed out 18% of flights because the air needs to be cool enough. That's why. And of course, 18% is not a lot. And you'll have chemtrail believers, they'll say, oh, wow, we really got sprayed heavy today, or they didn't spray us today. And their explanation is that, of course, it depends on the day. Some days they're going to spray us more than others or something. No, it's because the conditions aren't the same every single day. Now, if you're a chemtrail believer, your burden of proof must outweigh the repeatable and testable claims suggesting that it's condensation trails, which can be repeated even with electric planes. That's an important point, that there is no additive necessary to create this so-called effect that we call chemtrails. Commenter says, I saw a plane today without a chemtrail. Right. Well, you didn't see it with a trail, not because they didn't hit the chemtrail button, but because of the altitude, because of the time of the day, the temperature. There are many factors that go into it, and these can be tested and observed. It is a fact that if you go out in negative 39 degrees, you're going to see what looks like, quote, chemtrails, but it's not what they are. The official explanation, condensation trails, is automatically rejected by those who believe it's a cover explanation. And if your automatic explanation is, oh, it's a cover explanation, then it's not falsifiable. And what I mean by falsifiable is this: if you have a theory about something and you're actually following a scientific method, you're attempting to debunk it. You're attempting to prove your theory wrong, not right. If you're trying to prove it right, you're not doing science. You're a tainted witness. And this trying to prove it wrong means that if it's falsifiable and you can't, then it's most likely true. Now, if it's falsifiable and you find counter evidence, then you have to reject it. And I see this all the time with truthers. Very notably recently, the transvestigation crew, the transvestigationists, it's a growing movement, but their premise is wrong, because they will say, if a person has this skull shape, these clavicles, this shoulder width, and this finger digit ratio, they are the opposite sex they pretend to be. They have this whole system of what they consider to be forensic science. And moreover, they say that this elite gender inversion thing necessarily encompasses everybody in politics, every A-list celebrity, that they're all part of it at a certain level, that it wouldn't work with contradictions. Well, then I point out of all the people that they consistently name, I can list a number of transvestigated individuals who are actually on video and actually in photography, nude. And you can say it's fake, you can say it's CGI, but not without looking at it first. You cannot reject evidence without examining it, and they will. For example, there's a popular transvestigator, Bevy112, who claims that Sylvester Stallone, Daniel Radcliffe, Andrew Tate, Stormy Daniels, Pamela Anderson, and probably a few others I could list here, but these five here, that these are all elite gender inverted. Well, I'm sorry, but Sylvester Stallone did an adult video in the 70s. Andrew Tate, there's a video of him. There's 20 years of videos of Stormy Daniels. And here's the thing, they will say that these are all CGI and prosthetics. Well, I don't think that you can make that case without showing that the surgeries or the prosthetics or the editing is that good. And none of them will confront the evidence. They just reject it. But what does it mean? Well, if they're saying that Harry Potter's a girl and he performed live on stage, Broadway, he's not. But if they're going to say he is, then how do they explain that? And moreover, how do they explain that all of their biomarkers gave them the wrong answer, false positives? They got so many false positives. They get nothing but false positives, and they ignore these. So if you're saying that, for example, and look, here's what I mean by unfalsifiable. They will look at a man on TV and they'll say it's a woman because it's a smooth brow. Smooth brow ridge, it's a girl. But then if the guy has a really defined brow ridge, they'll say, oh, obviously it's an implant. In other words, they're right no matter what. Oh, that woman's a man because she's got an Adam's apple. Well, that in itself is not 100% accurate. But if she didn't have the Adam's apple, they would say she had a tracheal shave. She took it off. There is no answer, that there is no finding, there is no fact that will falsify their theory, which means they're not doing forensic science whatsoever. And for the most part, they ignored the counter evidence because it throws their methodology off, which has devolved into phrenology, ad hominem. I mean, I thought about just clowning them because they've all accused me of being part of the club. And I'm like, okay, if you're going to say I am, then I'm just going to say that I am. And then you'll be forced credit for it. I said, yeah, I'm one of them. I'm in the Illuminati and I'm a whatever you say. Suddenly they don't find it so believable. Like if I just came out and said, yeah, I'm a reptilian. No, suddenly it's not so true anymore. But this is the mindset of the what I would consider to be the MSM plus. And if you follow my blog at the Substack or timosman.blog, I did a piece where I was trying to make this point. Which do you prefer? Because there are three frames of reference here. I mean, when you're looking at news media, there are basically three ways to interpret it. Literally, or they're hiding something, so there's more to it, or skeptical. And the thing is, you arrive at radically different outcomes. And which do you prefer? Comforting lies, frightening possibilities, or the truth? And the comforting lies are pretty much the purview of the truthers. They do believe that what's on the screen is real, but there's more to the picture. For them, their worldview is augmented by lies, but they know they don't know what's going on. They're believers in frightening possibilities, but they don't know. The regular news consumer, the regular believer, the fundamentalist, for them, yeah, they have a lie augmented worldview, but they think they know what's going on. And they don't know that they don't know. They're believers in comforting lies. And the masses are comforted with these theories, are always tinged with fear, I think, to scare normies back to the mainstream, to scare people away from thinking that there's more to the story. But my point being, there's less to the story in every instance. In every single instance, whatever they're showing you on the news when it comes to these psychological operations, transformative events, there's less. There are less facts than the believers run away with, thinking that they know to be facts. But the thing is, they're not aware that we're in a state of psywar, which we are. We were born in a doomsday cult. We were born into a mental quarantine. And the internet is kind of helping to break it, but you can kind of see how they're automatically clamping down on it. There's like an immune system. I found a very good article today on the topic of the pandemic, where others have arrived at the conclusion that I arrived at in 2020. But merely talking about it gets you banned. And now, if you post links to some articles on Twitter, even with BitChute, they always say, warning, dangerous link ahead. Like there's constantly these new warnings, which I see as T cells. The media has an immune system. And when you have these links, it's like automatic, what I'd call it's automatic gatekeeping. They have these warning labels affixed to things, which, works on the normies. One of the things I've noted with the normies and these news reports, because I watch a lot of CNN, I've been consuming a lot of fake news, is they will put warnings on things so you don't look. And that's a pretty good tactic, because if you don't look, you don't see. They don't want you to see. If you look, you might notice how fake it is, which is obviously something they don't want you to recognize? How can you know it looks fake if you won't examine the evidence? How can you know there's no blood if you're too terrified by their statements that's graphic? I mean, do you remember the Borderline bar and grill shooting in Thousand Oaks 13 months after the Las Vegas shooting had 50 of the same victims? They showed footage of that shooting. There was nobody in the bar. It was literally an empty bar. And Wolf Blitzer's like, oh, it's terrifying. I'm like, what do you mean it's terrifying? But most of their believers are covering their eyes. Autonomy for All says, can you find out why my credit card is being charged? Yeah, send me an email. If you're paying $2 a month, it's probably Patreon. Send me an email and I will stop it and refund or whatever you like, no problem. Email me at tim@infiniteplane.media. And just all I need to know is your email address. Or if you don't have that, maybe your username, and it shouldn't be hard for me to locate. All right, let's see. Today is, it's Good Friday. Have they crucified Trump yet? I was wondering how they were going to do it. What kind of cross? Couldn't use dogwood like they did for Jesus, right? No way dogwood could hold him up. Okay, continuing. Yeah, okay, now chemtrail theory. Look, I'm not trying to debunk it. Like, I don't care. It hasn't been bunked. You don't have to debunk something that hasn't been bunked. Same thing for transvestigation. Until they prove it to be real or provide some evidence, I don't have to prove them wrong to dismiss it. I invoke Hitchens. We all know about Occam's razor, which is the explanation that requires the fewest number of logical leaps as most likely the simplest explanation. But Hitchens' razor is what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And it saves you a lot of time. I'm kind of doing a favor to believers in scary and frightening possibilities by deconstructing their fears, but I'm under no obligation to debunk their fears. They have to prove them real first. Simple burden of proof. Sadly, though, most people haven't learned this because this is what the mainstream media does. The mainstream media shifts the burden of proof to you. Oh, if you don't believe our BS, then you are wrong. You are a conspiracy theorist. Like I said, it's the emperor's new clothes. Oh, you think the emperor is naked? Prove it. No, you prove that you're not all lying to yourselves and imagining robes here, imagining that he's not naked. But again, this shifting of the burden of proof was done to silence critics of the mass media mind control. And it's worked. But it doesn't work on me. It doesn't work on me when the mainstream media shifts its burden of proof to me. And it doesn't work on me when a believer in this or that theory tries to push their belief on me. I will happily dismiss these things. I have no fear about the sky falling, no matter what the cause. Afraid of space junk, not afraid of climate change, not afraid of chemtrails. And it doesn't make me a bad person for not believing, but non-believers have a bad rap. Like if you're a non-believer, like I remember the first time I realized that chemtrails was like a sacrosanct, a sacred topic. Like you don't just dismiss it. I was having a conversation with some believers and one said, you don't believe in chemtrails. My kids, they go to school and they're dumped on their playgrounds and you don't believe in it. And it was like, I was the one spraying poison on his kids. It's like, look, man, I don't even fly over your neighborhood. It has nothing to do with me. Joined by Penguin Doctor, says happy Ishtar. Oh, yes. This should be a good one, too, considering the Super Bowl Babylon fertility rite with the goddess representative coming down as Babylon, Isis, Rihanna doing that ritual where she's in red and all the dancers are in white. Again, it's a fertility rite. The mass, which celebrated the goddess that is celebrated this weekend. Linda Curtis says you're a chemtrail blocker. Yeah, I am. I'm a God blocker. I'm a chemtrail blocker. And I'm not trying to dismiss people's sacred beliefs. Whatever you believe, it's fine by me. I'm just not going to accept any premise that I feel is trying to get me to accept the existence of something that's not there, that just adds to the things to be afraid of. Like, there are enough real things to be afraid of in the world without having to imagine things. Superstition, though, again, superstition is a tool of the elite to control you. Always has been. Religions have always done this. And the MSM is the world's biggest religion. We live in the lie world order, and those at the top who tell the biggest lies know what's going on. Those at the bottom merely believe, and all beliefs are subjective. If you're on the world stage, all the belief systems on the world stage exist in this closed system. And it doesn't matter if you're left or right, a chemtrail fearing activist or a climate change hysteric. Either way, you both fear the sky. And I think that's the template. I've been saying this for some time, that the atheists would laugh at a flood myth. They would laugh at the idea that, oh yeah, God's going to flood you if you guys don't change your behaviors. But then you tell them about climate change, and they're like, yeah, the globe's going to flood us if we don't change our behaviors and modify the behaviors of our neighbors. Get them to believe. Again, it's a religion. Commenter says, I'm tired of having to explain auto-hoaxing to women on Bumble. Well, look, here's something I don't do. I don't proselytize. Belief systems require proselytizing. Like, chemtrail believers don't find facts. They convert people to their fear. And then you have a big chorus. And they all believe it, but none of them know. Again, the lie world order. At the top, they know. At the bottom, they're believers. It's easy to get a bunch of believers around a cause, but try to find one who knows what's going on. But you cannot convert a believer to a knower. This is philosophy. It's epistemology. And we're living through a philosophical crisis. I don't think you can fix that. And I don't know why you would want to. Unless, I guess there's a good motive in there somewhere, white knighting, I guess. But I don't think you can. Like, have you ever tried to cure someone of, I'm not going to say cure. Have you ever tried to disabuse someone of their religious beliefs? Why would you? The mainstream media is a religion. It's a de facto religion. The globe is a God construct. But I understand, I guess, the impulse. You realize we're being lied to and you want to help people see through. But the thing is, most people can't see through. It all has to do with their frame. Are they a fundamentalist believer in what's on the screen? Have they stepped back from that? Or even can they? Most people can't. Most people can't. A lot of so-called truthers are deeper in the matrix than the half-assed mainstream media default believers. Going through your comments. Yeah, look, as far as the chemtrail thing goes, I understand that by not believing in it, I'm endangering all of you because I'm helping it to continue because I'm not part of it. I think that's the belief. And it's like this with religions. It's like this with Q. This idea that if everybody believes, the world will change. And you not believing, well, you're holding us all back. Like, yep, I take responsibility. Commenter says, denial of chemical ingredients makes you a dangerous idiot. Exactly. Exactly. It kind of reminds me of anti-vaxxers. Oh, you're not anti-vax? He's not anti-vax. It's like there's this episode in Seinfeld where there's this AIDS march, and Kramer doesn't want to wear an AIDS ribbon. Everybody else is wearing an AIDS ribbon. Kramer doesn't want to. And she's like, wait a minute, you don't want to wear an AIDS ribbon? He's like, no, I'm here. I believe in the cause. I'm marching with you, but I don't want to wear an AIDS ribbon. And she's like telling her friends, this guy's not wearing an AIDS ribbon. And he calls them ribbon bullies. And it's all because he didn't want to wear the AIDS ribbon. He didn't want to be in solidarity. He was the guy that was bad and they all beat him up. But he was there. And I feel like it's the same with this. It's like my irrational fear is better than yours. And I don't think that's the case. I think vaxophobia and COVID phobia are the same. And I might be the only person on the internet that'll say that. And I know a lot of people who are married to their fear will disagree with it, but I don't think that the COVID phobe is any worse than the vaxophobe. And there are all kinds of orthodoxies and things that, like, to be a truther, you must believe this. Like, you might as well have like a creed. Like, we are the truthers. We believe the skies are toxic. We will not take injections. We believe this. And like, do we all have to have a consensus on this stuff? Or can we just go by the facts? And the thing is, when the auto hoaxing premise emerged, most only pointed it at the mainstream. But you have to recognize that alternative media is part of the mainstream media ecosystem. It's wrong, it's fallacious to think that like InfoWars and CNN and Fox aren't sharing the same stage. That's why I call this thing monolithic. The monolith is the perfect symbol for the black screen, the one world order religion, the thing that organizes all mankind on one big set of lies. It is monolithic. It's on all platforms. Diana South says a creed and a pinky swear. Salty Siren says chemicals aren't inherently dangerous. That's the first problem with their argument. I agree. I would say that they use the word chemical because it's scary. It's a scary word. If you said, oh, there's some persistent ice crystals up there, way up where it's cold, that's not scary, but chemicals is scary. And I'm like, well, there's no chemicals in there. They'll say, oh, it's not about chemtrails, it's geoengineering. Well, then why don't you talk about geoengineering? Always a dodge. Now, I'm not in the process of debunking things, but by being a non-believer, I get challenged a lot by believers, and I'm used to it. I really am. And I'm just looking for the truth. For example, just to run back to this one more time, I would argue that transvestigationism is not forensic science. It's not forensic science. It's not anthropology. That it's more like phrenology, which is a pseudoscience, where they draw all kinds of conclusions off of skulls. But I would even say, given the number of false positives, that it's more of a witch hunt and quite possibly a fetish. Quite possibly. Some of them really seem to enjoy their work. I can't tell you how many times I heard certain of these investigators just really savoring the word Adonis belt. Like, I don't even know what that is. But something else too, we're talking about also a moral panic. We're talking about like the satanic panic of the 80s, which has come back in many ways. And if you look back, every few years, you have another all-encompassing theory to explain the bad guys. It used to just be Jews. Then it became reptilians. Then it's, reptoid, alien, satanic elite. And then from there, they dropped the reptoid thing. Whatever happened to the people who believed in reptilians? But when Q came along, a lot of people noticed the hand signs. Like, you can see why people would arrive at the conclusions that they're arriving at. Like, you're fully justified if you want to say that the elite in media and entertainment and politics and academia, I think you would be justified in saying that they're a bunch of Satanists or that they're part of some occult religion. They give it away all the time. But the thing is, this isn't just theory. We can point to their books. We can find references for all of the things we're observing in their own literature. But do we have enough information to go from there and call them reptilians? I don't think so. But anyway, my point is, the reptilian thing didn't really pan out. Most of the evidence was bad CGI. And this is something too I've noticed. Truthers will use bad evidence. For example, they will record a person on TV. I've seen this before. When Trump was being arraigned, someone had recorded this on their TV, but they were at an angle, so it made it look like the security guards had really big heads, as in aliens. Like, this is like a really tiny face and a large egg head behind this guy. And they shared this on Twitter. It was being viewed millions of times. Who was this alien right next to Trump when he was getting arrested? Well, it turns out, if you were to scroll through the footage, every person on that video had a huge head. And that's because the guy was recording from his phone off of the screen. And this is typical, though. This is typical of what I've seen. And, the worst offenders, some of the biggest liars are QAnoners. Portal Complex says, I saw a biplane write Marxist words in the sky with chemtrails. Well, the Marxists have won. I mean, the commies won. What else can we say? Commenter says, I'm a reality denier. No, actually, calling me a reality denier is like calling you a reality denier if you don't believe in the globe or if you don't believe in climate change. First, they have to provide evidence first. And the evidence that they provide is what? Denying what is repeatable and testable and asserting it to be something else. But yeah, as far as the commies and the skywriting, they already won. They won World War III, if you didn't notice. What do you think the Cold War was? The Cold War was a, quote, global propaganda campaign to convince the capitalist nations to shut down over a cold, which we did. And then they took over formally with the Great Reset, increased their ability to centralize the distribution of all goods and services. It was a mind war, and the West lost. Diana South says QAnon is a death cult. They love the idea of military tribunals and secret firing squads. Yeah, there are apologists for Q who think that because Trump is the savior, they're the good guys. And as long as you're the good guy, you can talk all day about murdering Democrats and you're not a bad person. I'm sorry, but the QAnon is a bloodthirsty cult. I've known this from day one. The first person that introduced me to it was happy about the pandemic. They were taking malaria drugs before it was cool. Back when the QAnoners were first getting into anti-malaria drugs because they thought a plague was coming. But this person said gloatingly, oh, this is great. It's a boomer killer. It's going to be good for the economy. Then he went on to say that, and you know what? You don't have to do anything. You could just stay at home, eat popcorn, and watch TV, and you're going to see the deep state are all going to be are going to be killed, executed on TV. And I always explained that it was going to be like 10 days where the media was going to be seized and every screen, every phone, everything would be hijacked. And you'd be watching an endless succession of Democrats being killed by Trump's army. Like this is why I call the MAGA ban. How I compare the QAnon radical movement to the Quran radicals. Radical Islam, radical QAnon, the same thing. It's the same thing, unless you can tell me there's a difference between the great Satan and the deep state. There is no difference. Is there a difference between a cave-dwelling terrorist ready to scream Allah Akbar and blow himself up to get virgins and a incel in a basement ready to go shoot people to express his suppressed urges and express his hatred for the West and Western women? No, it's the same thing. But if they're sitting there waiting for mass executions, it's a bloodthirsty cult. Might as well call it what it is. And how many years has it been? And one more thing. They've had years, like chemtrailers. Chemtrails have had 20 years. You guys could have filed a class action lawsuit. If you really believe that Delta Airlines is dumping toxic chemicals in your head and you're not going to even go on Yelp and write them a negative review, well, then you're just not an activist and you're not motivated. If I believed it, and this is not an exaggeration, if I believed in chemtrail theory, I would organize a class action lawsuit and a worldwide media campaign, and we would shut down the airlines and we would find out. But I don't believe in it, so I don't care to. And I think it's really sad that none of those that believe in it will take any action to save their lives or the lives of the future generations. Like if you really believed it, you're not acting like it. Diana South says Q is a mirror of Bolsheviks' misinformation campaign. Oh yes, Operation Trust. Trust the plan. All right, let's go through. It's Good Friday. This is a tweet from Diana Gaylord. Christ was crucified 15 days after the spring equinox. Trump is being arraigned the same day. Is it a coincidence or is God at work here? Well, God's taken his sweet time because Save the Children in 2015, now we're rounding on 2024. I'm pretty sure those children are all old enough to vote Democrat now. Here's from Raw Story, quote, "It's kind of a Jesus Christ thing. Report says Trump refused to be quietly arraigned over Zoom." Yeah, he wanted to be the martyr. Commenter says here, we have the documents. You got my documents. Yeah, you can't trust the government. You can't trust the CIA. They're a bunch of liars and psyopers. However, if they leak documents, you can trust those. Oh, yeah. You can always trust a leaked document from a known liar because no way that the most sophisticated liars in the world would employ reverse psychology. Nope. I mean, that's basic Machiavelli 101. It's like, we don't believe it, but we believe the leaked docs. It doesn't exist, but I've seen patents filed. I've seen plans, the leaked plans. Old playbook. I remember the first time I met Nathan Thompson, it was at a Flat Earth conference, and he said to me, "Have you read the protocols of the learned elders of Zion?" And I was just, I didn't know what to say. I thought, is he joking? No, he was serious. And I'm like, oh, you mean the plan that the bad guys leak that tells you how they're going to take over the world? And it's an obvious hoax. The syntax gives it away. It'd be so easy to do. Okay, continuing. Again, it's Easter weekend. It's been a very interesting week, though. I mean, this date, 4/4, Trump being arraigned on MLK Day, like, what is all that? Indicted on the date of Ronald Reagan's attempted assassination. His arraignment being, I mean, the timing of it. Again, he has his Mar-a-Lago raid on 8/8/2022. You could text Trump at 8022, and 33 weeks and 3 days from that date, he gets indicted. Like, this is scripted to create a martyr. Then you can attach him to Waco, the whole Waco Apocalypse Netflix show coming out on 3/22. But Waco with the Dave Koresh martyr, 33-year-old, called himself Christ. All this comparison of Trump to Christ, it's by design. Diana South says it's Resurrection Weekend. Portal Complex says car and truck chemtrails are safe. Yeah, we have a lot of these big MAGA trucks around here with the Trump flags, and a lot of them roll coal. And you know what? Here's something too. Maybe this is, I got off on the wrong foot with chemtrailers. I remember sitting in a friend's backyard, and we were smoking Camel cigarettes, like Camel Whites, and drinking Jack Daniels. And so we're drinking and smoking. Bad. And he pointed up to the condensation trails, and he's like, you know, they're dumping poisons on us. And I'm like, okay, I'm being warned about poisons from somebody that is smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol, but he's worried about 5 miles above his head. Like, I'm pretty sure the contrails are the least of your concerns. Lean Dion says 42 years with the Reagan connection. Oh, yeah, that's right. The Reagan attempted assassination, 1991, by John Hinckley, who has, interestingly enough, the same birthday as John F. Kennedy, 5/29. Yeah, he's got Kennedy's birthday, and he attempts to kill Reagan. 42 years later, Trump gets his indictment to the day. Commenter says, could the old manipulated videos meant to deceive be old versions of AI video editing? Think planned obsolescence. Interesting question. Now, I have seen this. I have seen people creating deep fakes of artifacts found in Antarctica, and it all looks real. Commenter says, the Trump bread and circus, nothing burger minus the bread. Distraction. Right. It is, well, you can say distraction, but I've been describing it like this. The world stage is about worldview warfare and keeping our focus. And it's very difficult. They call it the attention economy because they got to really fight for every second they hold your attention. And I used to describe it as a spotlight. And okay, this week the spotlight is on Ye. Next week it'll be on Musk. When people get bored, it'll go to Trump. Then it'll go to Putin. Then it'll go to whatever the distraction happens to be. They create distraction after distraction, but it's to keep our focus. And I realize that it's no longer even a spotlight because they change it so often. And it doesn't make sense that one minute you're afraid of nukes, the next minute you're afraid of political incorrectness. Like, these are not equivalent fears. Our priorities are screwed up. We should all be in bunkers. Like, if what they were reporting in the summer and fall with Putin and Satan too, if any of that was valid, oh, they can wipe out the UK. Like they said that they can shoot a missile from here to there in 3 minutes or 33 minutes to shoot us here. If that was true, we would be in bunkers. But no, they just move on to the next thing. And we've been conditioned not just to follow the spotlight, but we're like cats. The public attention span has been rendered to, we're like in the position of a cat, and Big Brother has a laser pen, and we can't do anything but follow the red dot. And even if you catch the red dot, like we often do, you can't actually catch it because it's not really there. It's just a beam of light. Now, I said this last week. They said Trump was going to be indicted on 30 plus charges. And I said, you know why they said 30 plus? Because if they said 33, it would be too obvious. Like Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. Like, all these numbers tell the story, at least of what a hoax it is. And I said it's 33, but watch, they're gonna shield it. They're gonna say 30 plus, or they're gonna just say 34. Well, anyway, this is what Trump posted on his Truth Social. District Attorney Bragg illegally leaked the 33 points of indictment. Bragg should resign now. 33 points, according to Trump. Where's he getting his info? Because everyone else is reporting 34. Why would they do that? It's because they don't want to be that obvious. The same reason why sometimes 42-year-olds turn 43 when their death gets reported. And they love to speak with numbers. It's a joke to them. I mean, they're writers, but it's just like, there are so many things that they cannot be coincidence, but clearly they're playing with our minds. Like, you had Marjorie Taylor Greene on 60 Minutes, and they had to point out that total viewers came to 6.66 million. Like, what does that mean? It's just a way of, painting up their enemies, or to me, it's about time control. And when I say time control, I don't mean like time machines, but I mean like script control, but they're news benders. If you've seen the play from 1968, Newsbenders, it's about a newsroom where at the higher levels, as one journalist is brought in, he's told that we plan the news 5 years in advance. And he's shown examples of things they're going to do over the next 5 years, including the moon landing. Only they're creating the news by scripting it. Again, news benders. And I think that is how it actually works. But they're not just bending the news 5 years in advance. They're doing it decades in advance. They want you living day to day, no long term. They want you thinking short term, because the world's going to end because chemtrails tomorrow or next year. It's going to end from chemtrails, climate change, or nukes. The world's not going to be here much longer. Might as well just live for the present. Yet at the same time, the elite controllers are writing the script out decades in advance. Yep, Trump was arraigned 55 years to the date of the MLK assassination. And that number really stood out because this entire fiasco, this entire circus with Trump has everything to do with Stormy Daniels. And we've already discussed the symbolism of the storm, the calm before the storm. Well, the calm before the storm tweet from Q, or the Q drop, is number 55. And Trump gets arraigned on the 55th anniversary of MLK Day, or MLK's assassination. And the 55 Q drop referred to the storm coming at the first arrest, which shocks the world. So all this stuff comports. But then going back a couple of months, you had a police brutality incident where someone was beaten to death, Trey Nichols. which was compared to Rodney King. His funeral ceremony was at the place where Martin Luther King gave his last speech, his mountaintop speech. So you have this MLK, Trey Nichols, Rodney King connection being ginned up a few months ago. Martin Luther King's daughter was at the Trey Nichols events, the funerals, the protests. Well, when Trey Nichols was declared dead, there were protests. They shut down I-55. So here you get a connection here, the 55. Storm, 55 years. The 55 thing was attached, of course, not only to I-55 shutting down out there in Memphis, but that same day, they said part of the sun broke off at the 55th latitude. We're 55 minutes into this live stream. And then, okay, one more thing. Trump's on Hannity, and he's talking about the J6, the January 6th choir, with the prisoners all saying the national anthem, and he gives the Pledge of Allegiance over it. And I'm like, okay, he compared himself to Elvis. He's like, I feel like Elvis because his track beat Miley, I think Molly Cyrus, he said. It beat Taylor Swift, 33-year-old Taylor Swift. He's like, I feel like Elvis. I'm like, that's funny because 55 years ago, Elvis had his comeback special. Like the number 55 was already very much associated with this before I found out the MLK's 55th assassination. Now, I didn't think they were going to kill him or assassinate him on the 55th anniversary. They're never that redundant or blatant. As often as they repeat and recycle, it's never that obvious. But what is obvious is they have built up a narrative to frame him as a martyr, and they've done this for some time. Even Donald Trump Jr. published a tweet on his Instagram, but he removed it, where he said, you know who else was arrested the week before Easter? And he posted Jesus. Like, they're not even hiding it. I mean, who remembers here Trump signing Bibles? Psyopsical says, everything seems to be a cover for the monetary collapse and the reset. Exalt says, anyone notice the Ukraine war has gone silent? Things seem quiet. Right. I think it's the attention span. The same reason why we don't have serial killers. It's just that nobody's paying attention long enough for the story to build. They have to do the mass shooter thing. And we just had another mass shooter, another non-binary shooter. And look, non-binary shooters are the new bowl cut shooters. They're just as fake, but the bowl cut shooter only terrorized liberals, and they figured it out. They said, you know what? The right doesn't care when one of their own pops off. The right doesn't care about MAGA hat AR-15 wielding psychopaths because they're on their side. They don't care. The 20 years of fake school shootings has done nothing to change the right's opinions about mass shooters because they're just not afraid of them. They say, oh, just arm the teachers. Stop giving them antidepressants. Like, they don't think it's a scary thing. And then what they've done, and this is intelligent, in the last year, now all the mass shooters are actually scary to the right. They got rid of the bowl cut, racist, Nazi, MAGA, and now you've got far left radical non-binaries as now the vanguard and of the mass shooters. And this is something that they're actually scared of. I'm listening to right-wing podcasts. I'm like, wow, these guys didn't care about school shootings before. Now they do. Now, this is something I brought up the other day. Married father kills himself after talking to an AI chat bot for 6 weeks about his climate change fears. Let's say that's true. Let's say it's true. Whose fault is it? Like, this to me proves that the media is a terrorist. And the NBC should be blamed. NBC has climate confessionals where you can confess for your carbon footprint. You can confess your guilt at being alive. And that's what they want. They want you to feel guilty, guilt control. And doesn't that sound like something that should come from a religion? Guilt, shame. Well, your mass media is your new religion. And they are operating on guilt and shame and weaponized superstition. Psyopsical says the industrial school shooter complex. Yeah, and it was a Christian school. And of course, the right wing is like, oh, look, that's what happens. We've created these monsters. Whereas the left is like, no, this person's a victim of patriarchy and gun culture. And it's predictable. Look, this is the template, and you will see this with every single shooting. And this goes back in time and into the future. Every shooting meets this same exact criteria. The left will say, caused by gun culture and guns. The right will say, caused by SSRIs and 420 weed. Basically, weed drugs makes mass shooters, not guns and not gun culture to them. But they all have they both do this. They have these like routine boilerplate explanations. And it's by design. Wayne Dion says they are absolutely the terrorists. Yes, I mean, I wrote an article recently about stochastic terrorism, the idea that if somebody with influence just says it and puts it out there, somebody might do it, which I don't think is real. The idea that this shooter is a copycat shooter, he's copying what he saw on the news. This is all trying to get us to accept the premise of contagion, what they call the contagion effect. And they've applied this fallacious reasoning to everything. Like I understand contagious disease. However, to apply that to ideology, to belief systems, yeah, that's pseudoscience at best. Memetics is fascinating on that level, but you cannot say that you catch ideas. You cannot isolate the mind virus, but they think they can. And now they're saying, oh, banks collapsing is contagious. It's a contagion. School shooters, contagion. Everything is now. But I definitely think you're right. Everything Psyopsicals mentioned about everything seems to be a preparation for a major collapse/reset. And something else to point out too, we look at predictive programming and metascriptors. And one of the dominant metascriptors has been Tom Clancy's work. Tom Clancy. We're talking Sum of All Fears, 9/11. In fact, there was a astronaut on the ISS who claims he witnessed 9/11 from space. And he claims that while it happened, he was listening to the audiobook of A Sum of All Fears. And he thought to himself, wow, it's just like the book. Hilarious story. But this Tom Clancy also has The Division. And again, when you say the word The Division, it makes me think of the crack, the schism in everything, the Kraken that's constantly referenced, The Division. But The Division and Dark Winter, and these are huge memes that have been forced into the narrative, into the big story. And so we've been watching this. What's with The Division? What's with Dark Winter? What's going to trigger? And the Dark Winter, the Division story, it all begins on a Black Friday when money contaminated with a virus spreads on a Black Friday and causes a societal collapse. So there's your connection. Your connection is this: the money and the contagion, the money with the virus, the contagious bank collapse. It was all more or less predicted in Dark Winter, but instead of it being a literal virus on cash, it's this explanation for how everything is collapsing like a chain reaction. And they've also attached to it, in a very contradictory way, fallout. Like, okay, either it's a nuke or it's a pandemic, but it can't be both. Pandemics don't have, quote, fallout. Fallout is from a nuke. But Tom Clancy's one of these metascriptors to look at. I would say right now, though, the main one is, I think the dominant one, especially in the near future, is Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is doing that Oppenheimer movie, which has to do with the beginning of the nuclear age. Fascinating story, but my thinking on it is this. They use psyops to, I believe, to stage things in advance. Like, for example, Ohio. People are like observing this train wreck that mirrored what happened in the movie. Well, when they were filming the movie, they could have filmed the train derailment. They could have pre-shot a lot of the scenes. they had a lot of time and space to do it. They had a closed movie set. It could have been dual purpose, which would explain why so many of their extras had to be evacuated and talk to the news about it. Diana South says Tom Clancy is most likely a Jesuit. Well, the thing is, and we can point to them. This is why I don't leap to conclusions that involve the supernatural. Like we see all these coincidences in the media. I'm not saying, oh, it's supernatural or it's just synchronicity or it's being like, to me, it's more like who wrote the scripts. And you can find names and then you can connect the dots. And it's quite obvious that there is a capstone level here. We're on a pyramid. Most people are at the base of it, surrounding the base of it, but there's levels to this thing. And the higher up you go, the more you're in the know and the less you're a believer, because we're all dupes. The world stage is a world of dupes. And the dupers are up there in the glowing capstone. And that's where you're going to find the networks. That's where you're going to find the connections between the different writers and the stories. And it all comes together pretty nicely. I found some more interesting things here as well, like the number 116, January 6th. That number is all over Alex Jones and Trump before 1/6. Like that famous interview on Piers Morgan where Alex Jones says 1776 will commence again if they try to take the guns. Yeah, that was a conversation after they were talking about how 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition was purchased by Homeland Security, 1/6. So he says 1776 will commence again because of the 1.6 billion rounds. Well, 1776 and the Kraken thing has been this reoccurring theme. But again, the 1/6 and the Kraken are positively correlated. Then you have Dominion getting their, or they sued Fox for defamation over the election, over the Kraken being released, 1.6 billion. And I found a number of other references like this going back. All right, let me scroll through my Twitter feed. It's been a few days. I've been busily working on Autohoaxology 101, developing the coursework. Before the end of this year, I mean, ideally by the summer, I expect to have a textbook of all the Autohoaxology coursework, the lessons, the diagrams, the explanations, the lexicon. And I think it's important work because we've been given very bad tools to discern the news. One is just logical, is just you're expected to believe it. You're not supposed to actually think. There's no cognition. There's no effort there. It's just absorbing it. But when you get into the conspiracy realm, you're given this explanation of it's a false flag if it's not real. And if it's a false flag, it's a whodunit. It's a mystery. And that's misleading. And what we've introduced and what we've really honed in on here is that by accepting the news media as neutral, you're missing the psy-war for the psyop. The whole point in calling things fake and not false flag is we're not agreeing that any of it's true, because we are including in our assessment the fact that the mass media is not an impartial observer. And that's where most people get it wrong. It's like the mass media is being tricked by a bunch of crisis actors and guerrilla filmmakers. No, that's not what's happening. They are part of the propaganda creation. Diana South says it's not news anymore, it's entertainment. Yeah, I think that is true. And it is entertaining. I watch it all the time. I've been watching since I've been in between headquarters. I've been watching CNN and Fox because I want to know where the average news consumer is. Where is the MSM fundamentalist? I don't want to be in an echo chamber of people who just see through it all. I need to know, just to understand, the world where they are at. Doesn't matter if you knew the whole thing was a scam. Everybody else went with the program and everybody had to suffer the consequences. And I'll even go further. I've concluded in the last few days that all truther causes are controlled op. And that's all. Because truther, think about this term truther. It's not a bad thing. Although you'd think so by the way that the mass media says truther, like it's a pejorative. But the fact is, and this is just a fact, the MSM is a liar. What they superimpose on the world stage, on reality becomes the world stage. The MSM is a liar. And the liars are giving us this worldview that we're all expected to believe. Now, if you counter the liars, what are you? You're the truther. And I'm saying that it's controlled opposition, it's controlled dialectic. The same hand controls the liars and the truthers. I've made this point before that from the perspective of the media ecosystem, Alex Jones, Megyn Kelly, no difference. You might think, oh, one is part of the liars and then one is a truther. Yeah, true. But they're both promulgating subjective interpretations. Subjective. They're not objective. And objectivism died, not with Ayn Rand. Objectivism died when objectivists fell under the spell of NASA and started seeing the moon landings as really the end result of reason and logic. Like they fell into the trap of thinking that the television is a source of objective information about the world. Oh, it's just a mirror. I'm sorry, window. The TV, it's the screen. It's a window to the world. And it is an accurate mirror. It reflects things of what happens out there. So you can trust it. And then you can build your worldview on that. No, you actually can't. The instant that you accept that screen as a window, or you think it just reflects the world, you've entered into their subjective realm. You're no longer an objectivist. Objectivism died. But the auto hoaxer, those who are aware of the Psywar, aware of what media is, yeah, they're the only ones who are truly objective in this world. We've removed ourselves from that subjectivity. Linda Curtis says, we are outliers because we call out the liars. Not bad. You're absolutely right about that. And calling out the liars, but also, calling out the self-deception among truthers. It's really nice to put on a badge. Oh, I'm a truther. What I'm saying is true. It doesn't work that way. It's really about your operating system. And the thing is, the truthers have the same malware that the liars have, which is their perspective is filtered through that screen. The difference is the liars are insisting it is what's on the screen. The truthers are saying, no, it's more. It's that plus some conspiracy that's sinister and frightening. They add on to it. What we're doing by being objective is we're subtracting from it. And this is new. This off-world stage perspective is new. Some people have had it, some people have stepped away, but it wasn't always possible. It was impossible, I would say. It would have been impossible to arrive at the right conclusion, insider information, without being an insider. The only reason why we have the info we do is because we have had certain epiphanies. For me, it was a certain smile. That's what it took for me. What broke the spell for me, and it sunk in, was it was the duper's delight. Because then it made me realize, okay, this is bigger than I thought. This is not just the media tricking people. This is the media working with government. And if it's at that level, it's bipartisan. It's not the left trying to trick the right into giving up their guns. Both sides are part of Psywar, and we are the target. Lean Dion says, Westworld calls those that go against the AI's program outliers. That's exactly what we are. And the off-world stage perspective is not escapism. It's not reality denial. It's actually a wider perspective of reality, one that's only shared by the elite liars at the top. Like, we're getting the view that they have without having to join their stupid club, without having to climb their pyramid of liars and backstabbers and deceivers. That's why I put at the top of my last blog post at the Substack, timosman.blog, I ask the question, do you prefer comforting lies, frightening possibilities, or the truth? Now, comforting lies sell. Frightening possibilities also sell. The truth, not so much. They demonetize it. And this is something else to consider too. I think that when we're looking at this stuff objectively, we have to recognize that there's a great deal of reason to, sorry about that, neighbors. There's a lot of reason out there, reasonable. Sorry, I got some drama outside really quick. I'm just being nosy here. Anyway, you're not wrong if you think that the elite are scum. You're not wrong if you think that the perpetrators of mind war have your worst interests at heart. It's not like they're benevolent. And I'm not trying to be an apologist. Like when I'm saying chemtrails are fake, or just saying that these are erroneous belief systems and truthers are compromised, I'm not against the truthers. Like at least they're looking in the right direction. At least they're on the right trajectory. But that's why we use the phrase guardrails. You know, I talk about this mainstream as being like the dominant path that we're all going on. And it's a stream, it's a direction. And you're supposed to go with the flow. Lie along to get along. But what happens if you start to question the central premise? You drift to the sides. And before you get off the path, you have very loud voices who give you explanations. Oh, here's why you don't trust the mainstream. Because of this, this, and this. They give you some extra stuff, extra baggage. That's why I call it MSM plus. Now you believe more than what the mainstream media fundamentalist believes. You're actually deeper. You have more baggage. You believe in frightening possibilities. And this is a position that's designed to contain you. It's designed that way. It's designed to keep you in a state of belief, being a believer. Because if you're a believer and you're not a knower, you really can't take any meaningful action. You got believers versus believers. And the difference is, of course, that those who believe in comforting lies, they think they know what's going on so they can sleep easy. But the believers in frightening possibilities, all they know is that they don't have a clue, but there is something up. They know there's a conspiracy, but they don't have all the facts. They have enough to keep them up at night. And then they can look at the average news consumer and call them sheep, call them normies. Oh, they're sleeping. Are they? Or are they just dreaming and you're having a nightmare? And I'm saying if you have to choose between a dream and a nightmare and being awake, the choice is obvious. And I'm on the side of being aware. I'm Psywar aware. I'm awake. I'm not experiencing a nightmare. There's no augmentation over my reality that has me full of superstitious dread for things I can't prove. Anyway, we'll be back. This is a regular thing. I was using my secondary computer here, hoping to get better audio without all the clipping. So if it worked out well, then this will be what I use from now on. But I also have a backup recording, and I will be sending this out via the regular channel. So if you listen, you can find, if you go to infiniteplane.live, you can find us on all of the podcasting platforms. Just go to infiniteplane.live. Diana South says, Q-tards sleep better at night knowing their nemesis have been illegally murdered. Oh, some multiple times. They're like, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton, she got Guantanamo back in 2019, executed. And they're going to show us on video soon. But then she shows up again and they say, oh, that's a clone. It's a body double. And then others are like, I mean, I'm like, at this point, they've already lost, moved the goalpost a few times. But for the most part, they do take comfort in knowing that their guys, their good guys, are beating the bad guys. It's always underground, out of sight, out of mind. Awesome. Thanks for the feedback here. This is what I'll do here for the future. I didn't want to have too long of an interruption. There's just way too much going on right now. But what I'm working on here is I'm working on building the IPS Institute as the sole place where you can find this off-world stage perspective codified. And it needs to be. It needs to be completely set in stone that, no, look, we are just attempting to be objective in a world that insists upon subjectivity. And how free is your mind from the MSM cult's influence? And that's an important question. It's really about being honest with yourself and recognizing, of course, that we are in a psy-war and it's monolithic. It's not the liberals, it's not the it's not the fascists, it's both. It's not the bowl cut shooters, it's not the trans gun persons. No, they're both fake. But they create these monsters to frighten people. And I'm just like, look, if your conspiracy theory or your assessment leads you to a place of fear, yeah, there's a good chance that the mind war has you and you're being dragged into there. Diana says it's the battle of the cults. Yeah, absolutely. It's believers versus believers versus believers, with the knowers at the top pulling strings. All right, thanks for joining. We will continue